obviously one, like if you're a pretty small agency, and this is just kind of my point of view, and you may disagree with this, but I feel like if you're a relatively small agency, there's a reason that a brand is going to go with you versus a much larger version of you, and you're part of it. You as the
Absolutely.
agency owner, you're part of the fabric, you're part of the brilliance, you're part of the why. And so it's pretty hard to pull yourself totally out of that process. Like this person who doesn't share your vision or didn't create your vision and didn't eat and breathe and can't just like sweat the values of your agency. They're just not going to be you. They're not going to perform like you. And that's part of the magic that's got you in the game in the first place. And so I think just the idea of like, well, I'll just bring this person in and they'll just like be all those things. To your point, like that, I don't think that's very practical. And I think it can work, at the right size. But also, I find that agency owners just lack the appreciation for how long this ramp takes for
Yeah.
somebody to like really understand you and what you're doing and to like do it in their own way. Like it takes time. So, but yeah, I think the thing you started with is the thing that I've always found to be true, which is like, and by the way, I often see these mistakes sub 50 and even sometimes sub 25. So again, I think it's like these are founder led organizations to that size, full stop. And if you're, I often find agencies that have the founders who just like don't love sales and are trying to replace themselves as soon as humanly possible. It's like there is no replacement. You're going to have to find a way to fake love sales to success because that's just it.
That's
Like it's
100%
you
it.
can't replace yourself. Like
That's
not
100%.
that you have to be able to be successful before somebody else can be successful. Full stop.
Absolutely. And the thing that like I rolled off a recent project with an agency that they're still independent and they have around 250, 275, somewhere in that 275 employees, say. Um, the owner is still brought in on sales calls because when you get to that level and you're hunting like mammoths, they
Yeah,
require that kind of buy-in from the C-level still. So like
totally.
I talked to agencies in the I don't know 10 to 20 range and they're like just exactly what you said. They're like, "Oh, I just got to replace myself, get out of sales." Like I'll ask them how they want to spend their day in like 3 to 5 years. And a lot
Yeah.
of them are like, "Oh, I want to get out of sales completely." I'm like, "Well, I got real bad news for you." Like,
That's right. I gotta tell you something. That's
you're
not
not
gonna
going to love
happen.
this. You paid me, so
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you,
Yeah.
but you're
I'm
not
gonna
going to
tell
enjoy
you.
this. And I think it's like, it's one of those things. If you're not selling to close accounts, you're selling the vision of what the agency
Yeah,
is. You're selling this
exactly.
to
Exactly.
employees. You're selling this to partners. Like you, you don't have a choice but to get good at selling in some way. Like
You
that,
don't
that
have a
is
choice.
your
That's the
role
thing.
as an owner.
And that's just a broader philosophical point. I think people lack that appreciation when they start businesses just in general. Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
sort of think that your job is to do the thing, and actually your job is not at all. Very minority of your job is to do the thing. Most of your job is like selling and building a team. That's your job.
Well, think of how much inertia there is to like get you to change a behavior, right?
Exactly.
You as a
Yeah.
client, you as an employee, you as anything, you have to overcome that inertia, and that's what sales is. And you
Yep.
kind of like I think you're right. I think a lot of people get into this and they're like, oh, I'm really good at I could build a better website than anybody else, or I could get a better ROI on my PPC spend than anybody else. And that's nice, but you're saying the same exact thing that literally thousands of other agencies
Everybody
are
else
saying.
is.
Like
That's
you
exactly
have to
right.
cut
Like,
through that inertia and cut through that noise somehow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. People, I think I often say is like the greatest cost for any client to pay is not your fee. It's the choice to do anything at all. Like
Absolutely.
the behavior change is the hard part. Once you get over that, like the money is secondary. That's the easy part. All right. Cool. Great. Awesome. Oof, two for two. Caroline, what's next?
Hello. I just want to inform you guys LinkedIn is up now. If you are on LinkedIn, I
Hey, welcome
apologize.
LinkedIn.
We
That's
were
what I was
having a
waiting
We
little
have
for.
screen
not
issue.
we saved all the good stuff for LinkedIn. Don't worry.
Yes.
But look, we'll share the recording. You can catch the other two back. They were good too. All right. So LinkedIn, welcome. And just as a reminder for folks on LinkedIn, particularly if it's your first time, Agency Hot Seat. If you have questions, Nick and I are here to answer. Drop your questions in the comment. Caroline will read them back to us, and we will answer them live. Okay, Caroline, what's next?
All right. So our next question is, what do successful agencies do that slow growing agencies don't do?
That's a great question. You want to take this one first, or you want
Interesting.
me to go?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. We're talking like top 1% of 1% here. That's what I'm thinking. So like
Yeah.
I run into this a lot, and it's weird to me. Um, but I guess maybe it shouldn't be. Uh, Leaders at that level, and this isn't by size really. It's that success can come for a small agency or it can come from a huge agency. But the ones that are doing really well that don't seem to have sales problems, don't seem to have production problems or profitability problems, any of those, um, they have a really crystal clear idea of what they want to build. Like it is like
Mm-hmm.
they can articulate that to everybody,
Hmm.
regardless of the person's understanding or familiarity with what that agency is or who they could be. They could tell you in a sentence what they're building. And to that end, they have essentially a relentless focus on getting there. And it's those
Hmm.
shiny objects that I mentioned earlier that come in every day.
Yep.
They are phenomenal at just knocking those away. And those two things go hand in hand, right? Like you know what you want to build, you know how you want to build it, and it's kind of like you're willing this thing into existence, and it weirdly works.
Yeah, yeah, man, Nick, I don't think I have anything to add. I totally agree with you, honestly. Like the thing that's always kind of was kicking in my head as I heard this question was just like intentionality. Like it's just
Yeah.
I think that the the big difference is the folks that and you kind of I don't know if you experience this, but I certainly do. Like I think you kind of know when you meet an agency owner who's like captaining a fast growing agency that's generating good margins. Like you can kind of feel it because, again, these are people that don't half-ass anything. Like they're open. That's the other thing I'll add is like, these are not people that are necessarily, granted, they have like a high degree of conviction and determination and focus, and they don't let themselves get distracted, but they're also not like know-it-alls, right? They're the
Mhm.
he who is wise admits they know nothing kind of people. The people who are open to learning and open to sort of like evolving and changing and but are not they're not like floating through space. Like these are people who are approaching their agency with a high degree of intentionality. They know exactly what they should focus on, and that's where they devote their attention. um as opposed to, again, I mentioned the sort of like the people who grow through word of mouth and organic and referrals, the people who let the business happen to them, who are reactionary, right? Who wake up this morning and I have these problems and I'm gonna tackle these problems, and tomorrow I'll see what tomorrow holds. Like you definitely kind of can get a sense for these are the reactionary business owners who are tackling the problems as they come. And that is a perfectly fine way to stay alive. It is not a very effective way to grow.
I mean, it was.
And so, yeah, yeah, right. Well, when there was when there's like a lot of free money being pumped into
Yeah.
a system, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's relatively difficult, and that intentionality comes with. I mean, that intentionality permeates everything, right? Like the idea to have a very specified niche or area of expertise or service offering, right? That's an intentional choice that fast growing agencies make. And so, like, yeah, having a niche is like one thing I would say is often true of fast growing agencies. But again, I think it tracks back to just the level of intentionality with which you make any decision. I think is I don't know. I think that's
I love that
a
perspective because like
differentiator.
I think back to like how this industry grew, over the decades since I've been looking at it, and you almost had to try to fail for a large portion of it.
Yeah,
Like you could
yeah,
really ride the wave of increasing digital marketing spend and increasing DX spend for the last, well, up through 2021, really. And it's only been
totally.
in the last 2 years that stuff started getting choppy. Spend pulled back, interest rates shot up, all that hit, and now I think there's a washout, not a full washout, because shops aren't closing at the rate that I would expect them to if there was like some kind of major thing. But I think it's just
Yeah,
becoming harder. I think it's people are like, oh,
It's just
I'm riding this wave and it's not doing the thing that it used to do.
it's gotten as hard as it probably always should have been, and as hard as it
Yeah.
normally is in other industries. Like if I'm being like agencies, there are none of our clients fall into this category, just to be clear to everyone. But there are agencies um, that probably don't have a right to exist. Like if I'm being very,
Oh, absolutely.
capitalistic, right? Like
That's not a hot
you
take.
know, yeah,
Give
like
it to
there
you.
are agencies that have no that have that do not have that have yet not yet earned their right to exist, and this is just a reckoning with that, right? This is just a reckoning. This is a reversion to the mean in my mind, to like what it should feel like. And yeah, this is freaking hard. Welcome to the game.
Yeah,
Shit's hard.
absolutely.
Stuff's
Absolutely.
hard, and growth does not come accidentally. And so I think that's and so for the folks that are not approaching it intentionally, that it's yeah, you're experiencing like what happens, and you're gonna run out of money. Um, cool. Okay.
I mean, there's a silver lining there though, right? Like these are these are intelligent people. Like these are people
Totally.
running these
And
things are
talented people.
like they
Yeah.
know their stuff. I haven't run into somebody who's like a dummy. Like they know
Yeah.
how to do this. Um, and I think the silver lining in it is it's these guys, you're small enough to change pretty quickly. Like you're
Totally.
nimble. You can
Yep.
enact stuff and go out there and level up your sophistication and do the things that you need to do pretty
Yep.
quickly. Like on the order of months. Like this isn't you're not
Yeah.
turning the
Yeah. Yeah.
Titanic here. You're really nimble.
Yep. Totally agreed. Totally agreed. Okay, I have more thoughts on this, but I know that I saw some questions trickle in from the peanut gallery. So let's go ahead, Caroline. What do we
Yes.
got?
So this one says there's been a ton of talk about how hard the agency business has been over the past 2 years, 1 to 2 years. What do you see happening over the next few years, and will there be a lot of consolidation?
Mm.
Well, I guess I mean, on the latter point, like the consolidation, like I would say, just in general, there's been a lot of consolidation in a lot of industries. Like the M&A market has been relatively active, just broadly. Like PE has driven, PE has entered a lot of spaces that it hasn't historically lived. It's happening in our space, accounting, as it is in the creative space. And so I think that's definitely having somewhat of an impact. And again, it's just like interest rates were enormously low. And so PE funds raised a bunch of money, and they are still, not to say that it all needs to be deployed, but they're still sitting on some of that money. So while the market seized up a little bit in terms of valuations maybe a year ago, I feel like right now, just anecdotally, a lot of our clients are having conversations. The multiples we're seeing are pretty good. Anyway, so like, well, do I think there's going to be activity? Yes. Do I think there's going to be like mass consolidation? I personally don't. I'm not actually sure that, because ultimately PE is what drives consolidation. And I don't think, just like with accounting, quite frankly, like these are bespoke service kind of, we all attempt to create like productized, repeatable revenue generation, like repeatable sources, or whatever. But like we're not widget makers. We're not selling t-shirts. These don't consolidate perfectly in my mind. I don't know that the PE experiment is going to work perfectly well. So all that to say, like, do I expect mass consolidation in this industry? I would say I do not. What I would say that I expect is, again, I mean, I expect a continuation of a reversion to the mean. I'll just tell you, by the way, that so back to the description that you gave of like what defines a top agency.
Mhm.
Those top agencies in our portfolio are having good years. Like this is not a murder across I mean, it's not everybody uniformly distributed getting beat up. We have some clients that are beating their numbers and are having like they're particularly existing clients they already have a relationship with are spending money. I think it's going to continue. Interest rates are going to come down. So like, whether we have a soft or a hard landing economically, like people are going to start to spend even more. The venture landscape is going to sort of free up, which obviously, has an impact on the creative space. So again, I think like we'll continue to see some of these lower quality, maybe shouldn't exist in the first place, agencies wash out. And then, like I said, I think reversion to the mean probably, is what I would expect. What do you think, Nick?
I agree with a lot of that. I look at this industry. from the perspective of why does it exist in the first place? And it, from what I found, it exists because someone was able to tinker with a new technology before that tech could unlock any kind of capabilities, any business capabilities, any economic benefit from that
Yeah.
tech. They tinkered with it because we're all kind of nerds here, and they found something interesting, and eventually the group of them around that tech turned that into a business case. Well, if you're doing that in-house, if you're doing that in a brand, are you gonna sit there and enjoy your like 110K a year and 9 to 5 and
Totally.
like you're not gonna do
Yeah.
that. You're gonna go out on your own. You're gonna say, oh man, I have like 30 companies I could sell this solution to. I'm gonna go do it. So
Yeah.
every new tech that had a business case came out. Social media did, big data did 10 years ago, AI
Yep.
ML did. Like you had all of these things where new agencies would spring up around them. And I think that keeps happening. I don't see a stop to that. So the in-house teams as they gobble up new agencies, because they're always a lot of them are always buying agencies. Um, as they gobble
Yep.
them up and they bring that talent in-house that could do social media really well 10 years ago, well, now that's more commoditized. That's not a thing that like
Hmm.
it's pay to play or it's table stakes at this point. Um,
Yep.
the
Yep.
new
Yep.
tech that's coming
Totally
out
agreed.
though is driving the creation of new agencies. So if you think of any kind of like roll up strategy, well, yeah, you can roll up what's there now. That's nice. And you can have, some of the
Yep.
best social media marketers in your rolled up agency.
Yep.
That the value that you'll be able to extract from that as a PE firm or as a large agency is limited. And there's a time frame on that.
Totally.
Um,
Yep.
Secondly, agencies don't scale. I wrote a whole thing on this
Yep.
and I got a lot of crap for it. And I stand behind it 100% because every piece of data I've seen
Totally.
that I've grabbed in survey data that I've looked at in the industry, you get less profitable as you get bigger. Like as your size increases, your profit margins go down. That's the opposite of what you want to see in an M&A roll-up strategy. That's one of the main
Of course.
pillars of why you
It's
would roll them up.
economies of scale is what we're looking
Yes,
for, not diseconomies.
they don't exist in industries.
They
If you
don't
want to sell
exist.
more
Yeah.
work, you either increase your price or you build more capacity to be able to do that. Like those are your
Yeah. Totally.
options.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I do not think there's
And
a
it should
massive
be,
roll up.
by the way,
Stick around.
I totally agree. And the funny thing is the level. I didn't see the thing that you had written though. Now I'm going to go read it, and I'm surprised that you got chipped for it. To be honest with
Oh
you,
my
because
god.
it like isn't that kind of the sale? Like, isn't that kind of the sales proposition that we're all selling anyway? Is the idea that like we're these small,
Right.
premium, nimble, like you don't
Mhm.
want to go with a mass like a holding company agency, right? Like we are more cutting edge and we're more authentic and we're more personal and whatever. And there's a lot of there's some real truth to that, and there's some real pricing power that comes with that. And the further up the chain you go, the more commoditized you get, and the more your profit is from a reduction of cost and not an expansion of margin. And so like it just that opportunity doesn't exist like it does in other industries.
Yeah.
Because like where like an industry like accounting, for instance, we get our margin from like trust and
Mhm.
credibility, and those things grow with scale.
Yep.
Agencies don't get their margin from. I mean, trust helps, but like being cool and being on the vanguard of what's new and creative, and like those don't scale with size. Those vary indirectly. So
It goes
anyway,
back to
like
why
it
they exist in the
makes
first place, right? Like they can do
exactly.
this
It goes back to why
thing.
yeah,
They can do this thing better
yeah,
than anybody in-house at a brand.
yeah,
So that's why they're hired. They're not hired because they, I don't know, have 500 people they could throw at a problem. That's easy. The in-house team can
yeah,
do that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. Love it. Okay. Awesome. Caroline,
I hope I didn't just
I know we've
torpedo
got
the
others.
viewers.
No, no, yeah, no, no. Look, I think this is no. I think this is a good. I think this is a good discussion. And again, there, like you said, there's some silver linings in there, just in general. And one of them is that like again, I think there's some there. It's I don't think either of us believe that the industry is headed towards like a market crash or anything
Oh
like
no,
that. Like I
not at
think
all.
clearly, like this. Look, agents have been around a long time. They're going to be around for a long time. Like there's just, it's we're going to have peaks and troughs and those sorts of things, but like great agencies will continue to do very well. It continues to be an incredible way to print cash.
Mhm.
It's not like you're not necessarily going to get the greatest exit multiples, like if you were building a SaaS company, but it is there, it is a great way to have a wonderful, a wonderful career in a print cash.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that'll continue to be true. All right, Caroline.
Okay, so our next one starts out, our sales pick up in the holiday season due to increased ad spend. Because the increased spend carries over into January, we're considering changing our fiscal year to start in February and ending it in January so that we can capture the January sales in the same year as November and December. So my question is, what are the pros and cons of adjusting our fiscal year?
That's all you, buddy.
Well, I'll start with this. No, you must start. Hey, so I mean, just so what you're describing is like pretty much every major retailer on the planet has a 131 fiscal year end because of what you're describing. Like more often, the reason that they have a 131 is because of returns, right? Like so they have this like huge holiday spike, and then people open their gifts and they take their jeans back, and so through the month of January, returns occur, and the idea is like I want to look at like the economic year, and that economic year doesn't track the calendar, it tracks a different sort of 12-month period of time. A perfect example, I'm on the board of a soccer like a youth soccer program, and we have a June 30th fiscal year, and the reason is because like our soccer year starts in July and it goes fall spring, and so there's an incentive to like the idea of your fiscal year is that you want it to more or less capture a sort of like discrete unit of economic activity. For most businesses, the calendar year is the right answer, and so mostly I'm just like, don't get fancy with it. Calendar year. If you really do have like and to this, it sounds like this person's point. Like if you really do have a meaningful amount of activity in January that is like attached to the work of the November, December, and they're kind of all related and you want them in the same period, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I would say do it. In terms of like cons to changing your fiscal year end, I don't think there's like a ton other than it just a little bit of added complexity, right? Like, if you switch tax accounts, you gotta like let them know, oh, we have a 131 fiscal. When this sounds so stupid, but like Q1 is not what the rest of the world calls Q1, right? Like everybody, when they say Q1, they mean January, February, March. You mean February, March, April. That's weird. People are going to, you're going to just say that in conversation and people are going to be confused and you're going to be confused and employees are going to be confused. It happens, right? Like, but that shouldn't be a reason not to do it. I'm just telling you if there's a con, it's just like it's a counter convention and there's going to be like small little nuances. But what you're describing is exactly the reason that anybody who doesn't have a calendar fiscal year chooses to not have a calendar fiscal year. It's for situations just like this. So I think that makes perfect sense. I think that makes perfect sense. The last thing I'll say is you don't have to change your fiscal year in order to evaluate your business on a slightly different um, convention, right? So like you might be a calendar year taxpayer because who gives a shit, right? Like it's arbitrary, right? And that's the convention. But you, for management reporting, want to look at your business from January to January. Well, like that's just a different filter in QuickBooks. There's no reason you can't just do that and forecast and treat it that way. And your taxes are just done in a different convention. That might be something I would recommend is just kind of informally go to looking at your business one way and not necessarily file to have a different fiscal year. But that's a choice I'll leave to the asker of the question. But I co-sign the idea of looking at your business from February to January. Sounds like that makes some sense.
Yeah, I agree with all that.
Cool. Okay, great.
I don't have any insight in it.
But you didn't see anything glaringly wrong about that. So I'll take it. So it.
No, I just remember when I was a equity analyst and companies report on a weird cadence, it drove me nuts because you had to sync them all to be able to analyze them against comps. So I don't know if that plays into it at all.
Well, I used to do, yeah. Well, and again, these are things like, the larger you get, the more it matters. In public companies, it really matters. In fact, I think you even have some sort of responsibility to choose a fiscal year that correctly reflects your business.
Mm.
I used to work with I was on the agency side and we had a grocer as a client and they didn't have standard months. They were
No,
like, yeah, I'm not kidding. Like it wasn't January. It was like
it wasn't January.
January 1st to February 4th. It was like weeks because the weekends matter
That's
because
so
there's like
funny.
seasonality. And it was like, oh my God. So literally we would say, we're going to do this in February. They're like, what do you mean? Like this period, period. It was period two. It was just like, you guys get out of here. This is too much. We've over seasoned the dinner here.
Oh my
Um,
God.
anyway, okay. Caroline, we've probably got time for one to two more good ones. So what do we got? What's pick your juiciest?
Yeah, I wanted to address a comment really quick, circling back to the conversation we were just having.
Oh, sure, yeah.
About not necessarily a crash, but is the market overcrowded? If you guys have any opinions or statements there.
Hmm.
Are there too many agencies?
I want to say like at an exact like answer, yes, there have to be too many agencies because like out of 45,000, some of them are not supposed to be there. Um,
Yeah.
I don't, that's a tough question to answer. That's good. It's a good question because I think it relates to, are there enough agencies doing the type of work in the text that are demanded? Are there enough AI implementation agencies? Are there enough doing stuff in, I don't know, tech du jour? Like, I don't, that's a tough thing to answer. I could, this
I,
is super interesting. I
I
want to look at this. I want to dig back in our data
you're
and
gonna
look
have
at
to
how
go.
they're all doing.
I mean, this is probably a cop out of an answer, but I think the answer is yes and no. Like there are yeah, yeah, I know,
There's
right?
gonna
Can
make
you
so
believe
many
this?
people mad.
This asshole. But here's why I say that. Like, I mean, this is a service agency. It's just like it's white space. Like there is my point is like there is absolutely an enormous amount of white space for any number of agencies to start tomorrow and go grab unaddressed market share. Like the in areas where we are underservicing, right? Like for the right entrepreneur, there's definitely opportunity tomorrow. And sort of by definition,
Yeah.
without necessarily stealing share, there's opportunity to create share
Mhm.
and so by definition, there aren't enough agencies there, theoretically. But there's definitely agencies in spaces that should not be there. There are definitely too many agencies in some areas. Not necessarily even just mathematically, just because of the way they're positioned. Like there's just too many
Mhm.
agencies that are not positioned at all. We
Yeah.
have a surplus of unpositioned agencies. We have a dearth of agencies addressing specific needs. What those needs are, I think, are sort of like limitless. I mean, again, I think that's my answer. Like there is still like it's not definitionally we're overcrowded. Therefore, like if we were just sort of like categorically overcrowded, then sort of by definition, the only way you could create an agency tomorrow and win business is to steal share. And
Mhm.
I do think that is definitely the best way to win business, right? Rather than creating new. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's room to create net new for sure. Um,
All right.
but not everywhere.
Two more. Well, so, man, if I think about it like an industry that is overcrowded, like it's not like car washes, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
million car washes from PE that popped up over the last few years. I don't think
Yeah.
it's like there's an agency on every corner right now.
I don't think so. I I don't think so. Also, the car washes. I'm always looking at these car washes and I'm just thinking, how's this thing cash flow? I mean, that's like a $3-4 million car wash, like $8 a pop. How's this? Who's doing the rolls on this thing?
That is
Sure.
a zero interest rate phenomenon, is what
I
those are.
know it must be. Yeah, it totally is. What a wild thing. Anyway, you're totally right. It's not car washes. It's not
Mm-mm.
car washes.
Mm-mm.
Because like it also is the kind of business that, like the sort of like again it's a great business but it because it doesn't scale and because the exit multiples are relatively low you're not going to get a speculative bubble like
Yeah.
zero interest rate money is not going to come in and just create a ton of agencies for no freaking reason because it's not a great use like it's not a capital asset like a car wash right so you're not going to see that it's not going to be systemically overcrowded probably ever it's just too hard to do.
Yeah. Yes, agreed. I love that insight too.
All right, Caroline. Did you say was there something else that we wanted to come back to,
Yes.
or Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this comment
Oh,
says to hop on the overcrowding question, what are the top ways to cut through the static of the we're different than other agencies because of X? And or is it worthwhile for North American agencies to look expanding into other geographical markets?
I like that question.
you should
I just
start with
talked,
this because I
yeah, I
feel
just
like you
talked to
have
somebody about it
strong.
today.
Yeah, yeah. This is the Nick question.
I
I
was
mean, I'll
talking
answer too.
to a guy from, I'm not going to name the thing, but it's he's from a large player in something software for agencies. And
Okay.
they operate primarily outside of the US. And when we were talking about the market dynamics of in US versus rest of world, specifically over the last year, and he's like, we've just been slaughtered. Everything has dried up outside of the US market. I don't think it's I don't think it's that drastic personally. I have non-US clients and
Yeah.
they're all doing fairly well. But I do think it's this more agencies from outside the US want to come into the US market than agencies in the US want to go out. Like this is still a very good market,
Totally.
especially if you look at the economics over the last year and a half. Like we've been good, like better than good. Um,
Yeah.
Second part of the question is like how to cut. Sorry, do you have
Yes.
anything?
No. I totally agree with you. I mean, I can only speak anecdotally, and so you shouldn't treat this as like this is fact,
Yeah,
but just anecdotally. When I ran my agency, we added a person to try to expand outside of the U.S. And a thing that like we were being naive and stupid, but the thing I totally didn't appreciate until having done the experiment is like I didn't totally like our in general, like on average, our brands are bigger, the budgets are bigger, our volume is bigger. Like it's just a different game overseas. And when you're competing with overseas firms and you're a US firm and you're competing over what is a smaller pie in most geographies, it's just not as attractive. So
in ones
I'm
that you don't
usually
understand the culture always. Like
exactly. So I
you have
often
culture barriers, you have exchange rate risk, you have like uh, um, local laws and local requirements. Like
exactly
the list of like the barriers are humongous.
huge, and the prize just doesn't substantiate because I think the prize is smaller. That's why everybody's trying to come to the U.S. As you said, it's a perfect market. So anyway, co-sign what you're saying. All right. So now, how do I differentiate?
Yeah. Um, do something unique. That's gonna be the worst response ever. But it's
Well, but
like
isn't that the truth?
well, it is. Have data to back up why you're where you are. And if you don't have that, if you don't have the ROI or the case studies or the reason why you're serving type of client with Y type of service and solving this problem, if you don't have that, it's impossible to cut through the noise. You are the noise at that point. So
Oh my
develop that
goodness.
kind of like that's really nebulous. Let me give a more concrete example. Um, uh, you could very easily go into a subset of an industry that you've had success in the past on a few projects and
Yep.
start really communicating with them and understand what like the core thing is that you're delivering. It's not a social media post. It's not a website. Nobody buys that. They buy a solution to a problem that they personally have, not this
Yep.
giant business organization, them personally. They want to get promoted. They want to protect their job. They want to not think about doing this thing. You're taking something off their plate. What are you solving for them? And then go hard in messaging in that and really figure out good solutions to it. At that point, when you start using the vocabulary that they use to describe their problems, you've cut through the noise. You're not there anymore.
You're totally, yeah, man. You said two things that I thought were gold, so I'll restate them. The one is like you look inside your own business first. Like you've done work for certain verticals or areas or problems that you like the idea of just like sitting here and picking something greenfield that you've never had any experience with, no exposure to. That's hard. Like you don't have any credibility, no comps, nothing, no case studies. So like, yeah, start internally and just say, okay, we've had a couple of clients that look like this, a couple that look like this. Those all may represent opportunities. And then the second thing you said, which is like, it's so much of it boils down to sounding like them. It like it almost doesn't it almost seems like oh it should be more than that or whatever, but it's just like it would shock you when you like take us for instance. We're accountants and we work in the agency space. it is not, all of us who have lived in the agency space for as long as we have, we know that, like, there's nothing totally crazy or fancy or unique. It's not, rocket science. It's just, but like, we have our own lexicon. We have our vocabulary. We have our own problems. And it doesn't take years and years and years and years to figure them out, but it takes focus. It takes intent. It takes interest. It takes curiosity. And when you can develop that and you can act and sound and have empathy for their problems and demonstrate that, that's all it is. That's all it is. And again, I think it's easier than you think. It just takes like intentionality.
Well, you have a lot of ex-agency people on your team, right? Like you have people
totally.
that came from that world. Like that's a cheat code.
Totally. And that's a thing I would recommend for anybody. If you're, again, lots of agency owners also came from different worlds. Okay, start there. Is that the world for you? Right? Like that's why we got into agencies. I came from agencies. Okay, great. My partner came from agencies. Oh, well, we know this. Let's do this. Right. So anyway, cool. Okay. Yeah, I like that. I thought that's good. Okay, Caroline, I think that's it. I think we did it. Did we do it? We did it. Okay. Yes, we did it. All right. So first of all, thank you. Big first thank you to Nick, who was a wonderful guest. Nick, this has been so fun having you on.
Thanks so much for having me.
You have a permanent invite to the agency hot seat. This was awesome.
You won't get rid of me.
I really enjoyed the debate and well, I shouldn't call it a debate. I enjoyed the discussion. We mostly violently agreed, but I enjoyed the discussion. And thanks to everybody else who tuned in on YouTube, and those of you that had the perseverance to tune in on LinkedIn. I know it was took us a second to get it going, but we got it. If we didn't get to your questions this time, good news. We hang on to these. We recycle them to next time. Nobody's ready with a question right at the first minute. So that's usually when we answer old questions. So we do this. What is this? The third Thursday? That's right. Third Thursday. We're going to put the thing on. We'll put the appointment on LinkedIn. Feel free to RSVP. But for those of you that join, thank you. Join us next time. You can see for Upsourced, we've got a YouTube channel at Upsourced. You can catch previous iterations of the agency hot seat and anything else that we've put out there. Nick, for folks that heard your insight and thought, and you referenced like 3 or 4 things that you've written, reports you've done, where could I go to find more about those things?
I post everything in my newsletter. Like that is the place to do everything. I've slacked off on a blog for like 2 years now. So everything
the newsletter is it.
Go to the website, prometheanresearch.com. I'm sure there's a link somewhere. We'll put it somewhere in the video.
We'll put it in the comments.
Yeah. Get that engagement.
That's right. Cool. PrometheanResearch.com. Awesome. All right, Nick, thank you. Crew, Nick, until next time. See you later.
Thanks.